Netflix, in my opinion, has had a pretty disappointing 2019. They came into the fall with so much momentum. They had a whole slew of titles with a whole bunch of talent behind it, and pretty much every single title has been disappointing in one way or another. The Laundromat was straight up bad. The King, well, I actually had really low expectations for The King, but it somehow went even lower than my actual expectations because it was just so bland and ugly and just bad all around. Dolomite was mediocre at best. You could even argue that it was a bad watch. The Irishman, even though it was good, it was a super disappointing film, the most disappointing of the entire year. But Marriage Story has not redeemed Netflix this year, but has proven that there are certain titles that are practically made for this type of experience. Simple premises such as divorce dramas are perfect for streaming options because you don't have to go to a theater to experience those films in their most full capacity, unless it somehow has like the most astounding cinematography ever. But most commonly, there's not a bombast score, there's not visual effects, there's not crazy ass cinematography that you have to see in the theater. Marriage Story has none of those things. It's a writer's film and it's an actor's film, like most divorce dramas. And there's not a single person I think would argue that this movie cannot be experienced at its fullest in the comfort of your own home. And that's half the battle for me. In order for a film to be good on Netflix, it can't be a film that I feel as though I'm going to miss out while I'm watching it on Netflix. Because Roma was one of those films where I feel as though that I wanted to experience that in a theater setting. But this, you don't need that because Marriage Story doesn't have this crazy-ass cinematography. Although the cinematography is good, this is so focused on delivering just an honest tale about love and marriage and divorce that none of that matters. All you need are Driver, Johansson, and Baumbach, and you have a holy trinity of this film that could all walk home with Oscars. I guess we'll start with the master of ceremonies himself, Noah Baumbach, who does a fine job directing, yes, but it's all in the screenplay. The mastery that he shows is in the writing of this script. And it's not only the best of the entire year, but it's one of the best out of any Oscar drama of the past maybe 5 years, even decade, because nothing feels as though it's over dramatic. Every conversation feels as though that it has the perfect amount of dramaticism to it. It doesn't feel like the weight of the world is behind every conversation, which is something that I feel as though is very common, that all these Oscar movies are seriously overwritten, and that's not the case at all with this movie. There's a healthy dose of comedy, of normal conversations, and there is a healthy dose of, back and forth fighting with, of course, the legal scenes. It gets really heated. There's a huge argument scene. There's only one in the film, which is a structural brilliant move on Noah Baumbach's part here because he doesn't have a bunch of screaming. It just makes that one feels like the weight is really put on that. It adds a lot more efficacy to the scene itself. But overall, I just feel as though that he captures what talking is like. He understands that dialogue doesn't have to be any stylistic way. He captured how we sound, and I really appreciated that because I knew he was going for that, and he fulfilled what his task was that he set out for himself. The entire film. Not a single line of dialogue was out of place here. Now, structurally, I do appreciate that there's one fight in the entire one verbal clash. One thing I do not like is that near the end of the film, there's one occurrence that feels like so Oscar movie. It felt as though that he had to incorporate a plot point in there somewhere, and it feels so forced and so unnatural for the rest of the film. But besides that, even structurally, it's pretty sound. It's a little boring at the beginning, but besides that, it feels as though that he always has the right thing to say at the right time. Perfect sequence of events, and all the characters are deep all around. There's not a single character that feels undefined, and that's the thing. There's this one character, I think that's my favorite because it represents how great of a writer he is, who, examines the relationship between the parent and the child, and, she's not, this particularly complex person with a lot of, wants and needs throughout the story. But that's something it's someone that I would meet in real life. She's super one-dimensional and doesn't really have anything to her, but the fact that she doesn't makes her complex because that is something that I would see in real life. She doesn't say stuff just for a punchline. She doesn't go out of her own character boundaries because Baumbach sets a lot of character boundaries in this film, and nothing that the characters do feel out of place. Ray Liotta, his lawyer, and Laura Dern, her lawyer, they're not necessarily stereotypes, but they're pretty close to it, and Baumbach doesn't, magically make them, as relatable and as normal as the protagonist, because they're not in this scenario. From our point of view, they're supposed to be this weird, like, avaricious, like, horrible lawyers that are collapsing upon these two reasonable people. And the story is about those two people, about Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's characters. Yes, the supporting cast is fantastic, and I could totally see any of them really getting Oscar nominations, but it's about Driver and Johansson, and their characters have a near perfect balance in this film, which is something that I feel as though that is super, super important, maybe more important than anything else in a divorce movie, that there's balance. You don't want the audience member inclined to one, because then it's going to be like, all right, this person needs to win because of X, Y, and Z. In the divorce, people are trying to get moral leverage. They're trying to seem like the better person. And if you have one person seem like they're trying and have more evidence to it, as opposed to another, the film is going to suffer because it's going to be seriously unbalanced and one-sided. But in this film, he gives the perfect amount of screen time to each character. Each character has their own flaws and their own greatnesses to them. And I like that he establishes the greatnesses at the very beginning, because it shows how rough it could really be and how it could really bring it out the worst in people throughout the film, especially in its later parts. And it's just brilliant all around. It's super honest. It's just what the world is like, and it's what people is like, and I just really love this screenplay. I touched on some of the supporting performances. I feel as though that they fulfill their roles, but Driver and Johansson, man. Johansson, in my opinion, gives the best lead female performance of the year. I haven't seen Renee Zellweger and Judy. I don't really plan on doing that, but Johansson really redefines what it means to be a woman in a divorce drama, and really, just a woman that cries in film today, because I feel as though, when I go see stuff like Midsummer and films like that people, they're just letting the tear ducts out. They're just crying and they're just sobbing their eyes out, and that is supposed to get them attention. But in this film, I really like what YMS had to say about this movie, because he said that it feels as though that she's trying to hold back tears. It feels like, tears are coming, but she's trying to fight it as well. And that's, it's hard enough to just cry. It's hard enough to cry on command, but to seem as though that you're trying to hold back tears and cry at the same time is a huge feat. Johansson does so many great things with her character the entire film. Of course, there's plenty of nuance to her, and, it would be stupid and inconvenient for everyone if I went through every single little thing she did, but it's just, she's a likable, realistic person that she could have easily botched. It could have been a super idealistic, she, at the beginning of the film, I thought that she was going to be like the proverbial good guy. I thought that Baumbach, I thought it was going to be a fine movie, but she adds enough flaws to the character and enough wrongs to her that were brought more to Charlie's side, which brings me to Adam Driver. Adam Driver has a hard job as well. They both have hard jobs, because he has to make his character seem better than he is to us, because it seems that he is selfish and he is contained in his own world, and he has to prove to us that he is good. And that, to me, is what makes this movie, that each main character has a different burden of proof. Adam Driver has a burden of proof to make the audience think he's good, and Scarlett Johansson as an actress has a burden of proof to make us think that she's less perfect than the situations and the circumstances have made her. And what that does is bring everything to equilibrium, that you're not rooting for everyone. You just want to see these two people work it out the best way possible. And it's really painful because, of course, as you know, things are going to get worse before those 2 hours and 16 minutes are up. And there are some extremely painful scenes. And while I didn't cry at any moment, I don't think that this is as emotional as it could have been. I also don't think it's as funny as it could have been, but I'm glad, People said that it was, funny, and I didn't think it was really that funny at all. But I'm glad it didn't go down the, road of us and overdid the comedy. This film just made sure that it got what it needed to get right. It made sure that I was able to, take in the acting and the screenplay. The screenplay, of course, I gushed over for however many minutes now, but the acting itself, I was like gasping at some points. I mean, the performances, like especially at the end, Adam Driver sings a song at the end, a theater song, and it is maybe the best acting of the entire year. It's just when you're given that situation where you have to sing and then also, bring everything to that you had about your character and his circumstances right now into the song and the performance of that song, I mean, just forget about it, man. The performances are added this world for this movie. This could have easily been an okay movie, Netflix's first divorce movie. Okay, it may get some Oscars here and there, but everyone brought their A game. The entire cast made sure that they brought everything that they needed to. Every single character I enjoyed watching on screen, every single actor and actress did a fine job. I thought Randy Newman's score was pretty good. Of course, I do have some, minor but still tangible flaws. I believe as though that there's one plot point which I cannot spoil that is super forced at the end. I think the beginning is a little slow. And I believe as though that it doesn't pull on the heartstrings as much as it needs to. Sometimes the way Baumbach directs it, he's not able to capture the emotions. He, holds for too long. He doesn't cut as much as he needs to. And, the score doesn't swell as much as it needs to get me to that next level of emotion. I always felt as though I was observing the actors instead of actually feeling for the characters in some of those more intense scenes. And that's fine because the actors were so freaking good, but it would have been nice to just feel a little more integrated into the story. But besides that, Marriage Story is fantastic. I'd give it a 9.0 out of 10. It's really solid. I think it's the best drama of the year, and I hope that it gets nominated for really Best Picture. I hope Baumbach wins for Best Screenplay, and I hope that Johansson wins. I think that she deserves Best Actress. And, Driver and Baumbach for Direction, I think they deserve some nominations at this point, and I think this movie will get some love. And I hope it gets love by people that have Netflix. I hope that Baumbach and the people behind this know that their work is appreciated and that good Oscar dramas can still exist. So thank you so much for watching, and see you all next time.